Good morning. Welcome to Magnolia Hall. We're owned and operated by the Natchez Garden Club. The Garden Club has been in operation since 1927 and has played a significant role in history here in Natchez for almost 100 years. You're at the home of Thomas Henderson, the great last mansion built before the Civil War, built in 1858. Mr. Henderson was a cotton planter, he was a banker, he was a cotton broker, and he owned 2 cotton warehouses, one here and one in New Orleans. The first question we typically get about Magnolia Hall is, why is the house painted brown? Well, in the mid-1850s, the most fashionable building material in the country and along the East Coast with the wealthy individuals were brownstones. And Mr. Henderson wanted a brownstone like the Vanderbilts and the Astors, but we don't have brownstone in Mississippi. So this house is actually built of red brick. It was stuccoed over, painted brown, and then scored off to resemble large stones. That's part of the Greek Revival architecture of this particular mansion. Also the portico and the large Ionic columns here, that also too are some of the earlier Greek Revival details of the mansion. But what made building this house a little challenging was there was a residence on this site built in 1831 called Pleasant Hill. And it was built by Thomas's father, John Henderson, and his wife, Celia Henderson. So let's go in and I'll tell you a little bit about that house next. We're in the center hallway now of Magnolia Hall, and here we have John Henderson, who traveled here from Scotland in 1778. Celia Mitchell Henderson, who was from South Carolina. Together they married and they had Thomas Henderson, Alex Henderson, and Suzanne Henderson, their 3 children. When they passed away, they had already built a 2-story Federal-style house on this lot. The house is called Pleasant Hill, and they willed it to their daughter Susanna, who didn't have a husband and didn't have a house. So in 1856, Susan deeded the property to her brother Thomas, and they actually jacked up the 2-story Federal-style house called Pleasant Hill, had it pulled by horse and oxen, and it took about a year to move it 1 block south of here on the corner of Pearl and Orleans Street. Once that house was moved, then this house was able to be built, and Mr. Henderson had this house completed by 1858. All right, now let's go into the double parlors and talk about entertainment here in Magnolia Hall. We are now in the front parlor, and I'd like to show off some beautiful Paris porcelain. It was highly collectible amongst planners in the 1850s, and it's highly collectible today still to many antique dealers. The parlor set in the house is actually from a house called Ravenna, and we purchased that, the Garden Club did, in about 1980. We had it reupholstered in this silk scalamandra reproduction fabric, so we're very proud of our parlor set. The house retained its name, or got its name, from the magnolia blossoms in the medallions above the gasoliers. Although these 2 gasoliers are reproductions, we do know that the magnolia molding and the magnolia medallions are original to the house. In the larger parlor here, we have a continuation of the same parlor set, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about Berlin work. Ladies in the 1850s had servants, so they had free time for kits and crafts, if you will. And this is called Berlin work. This is one of many bell pulls that would have been in the house. It would have been purchased as a kit. The mistress of the house or a young lady in the house would have actually done all the embroidery on it or the cross stitch on it. It would have been sent back to Berlin, Germany, and they would have put on hundreds of little tiny crystal beads. If you look up close, there's a beautiful shine to it. Also want to point out, here we have Thomas Jr. This is Thomas's oldest son. He immediately joined the Confederacy as soon as war broke out. He fought valiantly and then was captured. He had been wounded near Baltimore. He was captured and he was imprisoned in Baltimore for the last 6 months of the war. Once he returned to Natchez, he became an employee at a bank here in Natchez and was a prominent citizen throughout the remainder of his life. He was actually considered a traitor. He was a Confederate. He fought for the Confederacy. So he applied for a presidential pardon after the war, and this is the actual document. Andrew Johnson signed it. It says that he won't own slaves and that he'll only pledge allegiance to the Union and no longer the Confederacy. So it's a significant document. We're proud to have that. Our piano is a gift to us from the mayor and his wife. We recently got this about 2 or 3 months ago. We do a lot of entertaining here. We have a lot of brunches, lunches, weddings, balls here. So we use the piano on a regular basis for entertainment. We're very proud to have that. Now let's go into the back bedroom and look at Mr. Henderson's actual bed. In the back bedroom, we have here images of Thomas Henderson, who was 60 years old when the house was built. We have an image of his daughter, Julia, who we believe may have had multiple sclerosis. She had several health issues she mentions in her diary, and so we believe that she may have had some sort of illness that prevented her from continuing her musical career, and she also wrote children's books as well. And then we have the younger son, John Waldo. So the immediate family that lived in the house was, of course, Thomas Henderson, his daughter, and then his 2 sons, as well as his sister, Thomas's sister. And then there were 2 young ladies, a 10 and a 12-year-old niece, that were both adopted and showed up in the 1860 census. Originally, this room was a sitting room, but once Thomas built the house, he had a stroke and was moved downstairs for easier access, easier care, and so that he could have company. This is the actual bed that Thomas Henderson died in 160 years ago yesterday. March 6th of 1863, Thomas passed away from a stroke with his family surrounding him here in the back bedroom. So we're still in the back bedroom here, and I wanted to point out the mantel. All of the mantels in the house are Italian Carrara marble, and we have what's called a summer cover over where the actual fire would have been built. In 1858, Thomas had the forethought and realized that coal burned longer and hotter and was less expensive than wood, and so all of the fireplaces in the house were all coal burning. So this instrument right here is called a coal scuttle. They would have carried coal in at night so that they could have continuously kept the fire warm, and then they would have taken the ash out in the morning. So that's how they actually used the fireplaces here at Magnolia Hall. We're in the dining room now, and I would like to point out some of our beautiful Paris porcelain here. We have this center clock that was signed and painted by Jacob Petit, a very prolific and famous porcelain painter of the 1850s. We also have what's very common here in Natchez. These are called plate warmers, and the back is open. The plates get warm from the fire, and with each new course of a meal, you would get a fresh warm plate. I'd also like briefly just to talk about our silver pattern. We have what's called the Melrose pattern. The Garden Club in the 1930s requested a silver pattern be made by Gorham Sterling Company so that we would have something that's reminiscent of this genteel lifestyle we have here in Natchez. So Gorham did indeed come down. They went to Melrose Plantation. They were inspired by a motif off the back of a settee or a chair, and they created the silver pattern that we have here in the dining room. We only have one 10-piece place setting on display. The remaining 2,400 pieces is in the local bank here downtown.
This restoration work we do is absolutely exhausting. That's why I take Ritual multivitamins for women.
Ritual is created with clean ingredients and key nutrients to help fill common dietary gaps. It was designed to support foundational health, with nutrients to support brain health, bone health, blood building, and antioxidant support. I trust Ritual because of the research and testing they've done. They offer the first visible supply chain for all their labeled ingredients, so you know where they come from and why they're included. They're designed to dissolve later in the small intestine. That's important because this is the ideal place to absorb nutrients, and it's gentle on your stomach. You can even take them without food. Start a daily ritual that you can feel good about. Ritual is offering our followers 20% off during your first month. Just visit ritual.com/restoration20 to start today.
We have something else in the dining room that I like to share with our guests. This is actually from 1840s, and this is a work done by a prominent woman here in Natchez. This also too was a kit that could be purchased. Young ladies would buy wooden molds, pour melted wax in those, and they would come out with these fruit shapes. Then they would then paint them to resemble fruit. So we have lemons and peaches and berries and grapes, pumpkin and a pickle. All of these are made out of wax, and they have survived the heat of the Mississippi summer since the 1840s. So I think it's a remarkable piece to share with our guests here. We are still here in the family dining room. We're about to go into Mr. Henderson's office. I'd like to point out the carpet that we have here. This is actually carpet that was reproduced from carpet that was used in the White House of the Confederacy in Richmond, Virginia. It's called the horse chestnut pattern. It was made in thin strips, pieced together, then sewn, and of course by 1855 they did indeed have wall-to-wall carpet. In Mr. Henderson's office here, we have an overflow space for our entertainment. We have a lot of weddings and luncheons and dinners, so we keep that set up as a dining room as well. But that was the original office for Mr. Henderson. As I said, he was a cotton planter, he was a cotton broker. He had 2 warehouses and was a very busy gentleman, if you will. This particular gasolier here is from a house called Anchuca, which is in Vicksburg. We're now in the library, which Mr. Henderson would have used with his male guests as far as business and entertainment. And the interesting story behind the mantel here is this is one of the original upstairs mantels from Magnolia Hall. When the Episcopal Church had their elementary and kindergarten school here at Magnolia Hall in the 1960s and 70s, this mantel was actually sold. And a woman here in Natchez purchased it and was using it for yard art in her garden. So once the garden club got Magnolia Hall, they were able to retrieve the mantel and bring it back. So this is an upstairs mantel, and we know that because there's no decoration. Had it been intended for a public room, there would have been a lot more ornamentation or carving. So we have copied this particular mantel for all the mantels upstairs. And each 12 rooms of the house each has a mantel and a coal-burning fireplace. I'd also like to point out a couple of original pieces to the house. Thomas Henderson, again, was the builder of the house. This is his inkwell. This is paper mache inlaid with mother of pearl and then black lacquered. And we also, too, have here just a little box that sat on his desk that is also paper mache and inlaid with mother of pearl and then black lacquered. We have 2 bookcases downstairs and a half a bookcase upstairs, all with the original library of Thomas Henderson. We were able to retrieve that once the house was gifted to the Natchez Garden Club. We have 2 alabaster urns here in the library. They are original to the house. We do know that, but we're not sure which room they were used in. Now I'd like to tell you some of the history of Magnolia Hall. We know that it was built by Thomas Henderson in 1858. Unfortunately for Thomas, he suffered a stroke and died by 1863, right before the end of the Civil War. Once he had passed away, he had 2 adult sons and an adult daughter that lived here in the house. So a gentleman came to the 3 surviving children of Thomas's and told them that he owed $40,000. This was an investment he made before the war. Unfortunately for the Hendersons, their money was really in this house and property. So in 1866, they auctioned this house off and all of the contents to pay off their father's debt. 2 sisters bought the house, and they were owners in the Coons Britton Bank. They lived here until about 1900. When the 2 sisters passed away, the house became a boarding house for well-to-do individuals. And then in the 1960s, the house was actually used as a school by one of our local churches. When the house was being used for the school, they actually did a lot of renovations. They lowered all the ceilings and put in acoustical tiles. So that damaged some of the plaster molding that we have here and the center medallions that we have above the light fixtures. They knocked down walls on either side of the hall. They sold the original mantels to the house, and then they sold all the original gasoliers to the house. So the school used the house until 1976 when they were able to build a school of their own. And Magnolia Hall reverted back to the George Armstrong family. Well, the Armstrongs lived in Texas and loved the mansion, but didn't want to live here. And so in 1976, they donated Magnolia Hall to the Natchez Garden Club, and it's been an ongoing preservation project ever since 1976. Everything that you see here has been renovated by the Garden Club. Everything you see here has either been purchased on loan or bequeathed to the Natchez Garden Club, and so we're very proud of this, one of our main properties. Well, some more about the mansion here is that it's a 10,000 square foot Greek Revival mansion. There are 6 public rooms downstairs and 6 bedrooms upstairs, a servant's wing that includes a kitchen and what was at one time the outhouses as well as the laundry room. So now let's go upstairs and look at some of the bedrooms here at Magnolia Hall. Now we're upstairs in what was the children's bedroom. The 1860 census tells us that Thomas took guardianship of 2 of his nieces, a 10-year-old girl and a 12-year-old girl. And these are actually their toys, the 2 little furniture bookcases, if you will, and the table and chairs. Those are original to the Henderson children. They actually played with those toys. The significance of the door here is that the servants weren't supposed to be seen or heard, so they were not allowed to use the inside staircase. There's a back staircase off the back gallery where the servants would come up the back staircase and they would enter through this door here to come into the second story. Also, Mr. Henderson in 1860, when people were bathing about twice a month, had the wherewithal and the forethought to put in a bathing room. So he had a large metal basin put in a very small room. He had a cistern put in the attic, and water was literally drained into a room behind this door here, and that was his bathing room. So that was something that was very new in 1858 when they built the mansion here. We're upstairs now in what was Susanna's bedroom at that time, and I love to point out this lap desk. This, of course, is the predecessor to our laptops. And on this, we have a wonderful little slip of paper signed and dated April of 1814, and it gives the bearer of the certificate a free barrel of whiskey. So that allows us to know that they have been partying in Natchez ever since 1814. I love to point out the bed here. This bed was purchased at Prudent Millard's shop, probably in New Orleans. It's monumental. It's made of rosewood. It's got the beautiful grain behind it. We still have the bed hangings to put on it, but that's another one of our projects on our list of things to do here. We're here in what was Julia's bedroom. And this, of course, is a hoop skirt from the time period as well as a corset here. And of course, these were regular day wear for ladies that would have lived here in Magnolia Hall. We have this lovely bed that was donated to us by a member of the Garden Club. And I love to point out the petit-point canopy on the bed. Now, this is not what they would have had in 1850, but it is remarkable in that it is petit-point, the very smallest needlework you can use. And it took one member of our Garden Club 3 years to complete that canopy. So we are very proud of it, and I like to show it off as part of our tours. As I said, the Natchez Garden Club was founded in 1927, and we are surrounded here by images of our former presidents, as well as dresses that they had made for the pilgrimage period to give tours in. So we love to show off our gowns, and then again, we are very proud of our heritage and all of the lovely ladies that have been presidents of the Garden Club since 1927. We're in the 3rd bedroom upstairs now, and we have several things I'd like to point out. Of course, in the 1850s, they didn't have closets, so they would have used chest of drawers, trunks, and armoires to have stored all of their clothes. Ladies would have got fashion ideas from Godey prints, which we have framed here along the wall. There's several images of the latest in fashion, and you would take those to your seamstress and have the latest dress made for you, so you could be fashionable for Natchez society. We, of course, have another version of our chamber pot here with a potty chair. And then I also like to point out, we dress our children of the Garden Club, the youth of our Garden Club up, and they also give tours and do presentations for tourists and guests as well. Here we're in the Costume Museum, and we're really proud to show off these lovely gowns that have been worn by members of our Garden Club since the 1930s. The tradition is the Garden Club nominates a royal court from our youth of the Garden Club, and so we announce those at our Christmas party. Then every year we nominate a king and a queen of pilgrimage. They reign for a year and they promote the Garden Club. We have an image of them here. This is our king and queen of 2005, and she's actually wearing a dress that her grandmother wore as queen in 1967. So these are all gowns that have been worn by our royal court. The young men will sometimes wear a Confederate uniform, or as this uniform here is a military uniform, they may indeed wear that as well. We are now in what I call our history room. I told you that Thomas Henderson's sister inherited a house called Pleasant Hill that was on this lot. She lived here with Thomas until the house was completely moved, and so she eventually moved to Pleasant Hill. It was the original house that was on this site before it was built. Once this house was moved, Thomas was able to build his beautiful Magnolia Hall mansion, and then unfortunately after the war, when the family had to pay off the debt, they sold Magnolia Hall, all of its contents, and then moved into a much smaller house called Belvedere, which is situated next door to the driveway at Dunleith. So the family had a drastic lifestyle change. They went from a grand Greek Revival mansion, 10,000 square feet, with 6 servants, to a much smaller house with no servants. So indeed, it was a drastic lifestyle change for the Henderson family. This is a recent donation to here at Magnolia Hall. This lovely dress is from about 1870, 1875. It's made out of silk, and as you can tell, it's in very fragile shape, but it's still a wonderful example of what women wore here in Natchez in the 1870s. We are delighted to have the original carriage steps from the Henderson mansion back here in Natchez. A family member actually had these in North Carolina, and she donated these back to the Garden Club last year. We are here in the courtyard now at Magnolia Hall, and I'd love to share with you our wonderful fountain aquarium. This is probably mid-19th century wrought iron, and of course it would hold water for fish and also have a fountain and an area for candles. This is one of 2 here in Natchez, and these are the only ones I've ever seen before. We invite you to come and join us here in Natchez for our wonderful spring pilgrimage. Tickets can be purchased through littleeasytours.com online, or you can actually purchase tickets at any of the residences that are open that day for a pilgrimage.
Don't forget to go to ritual.com/restoration20.